My name is Clara Sterling. I am 68 years old, and for the last 45 of those years, I have been a master of a silent, invisible art. I am not a painter or a poet. My medium is not clay or sound. My medium is numbers. Not the grand, world-shaking numbers of stock markets and corporate mergers, but the small, humble, relentless numbers that constitute a life. Grocery bills, mortgage payments, insurance premiums, and the slow, steady, patient accumulation of interest. For most of my life, I was a bookkeeper for a small family-owned textile company. I loved the quiet, irrefutable logic of a balanced ledger, the clean satisfaction of a reconciled account. There is a story in numbers, a truth that cannot be swayed by emotion or rhetoric. A column of figures, to me, is a biography written in the plainest language on earth. My own biography, if written in such a ledger, would show a life of meticulous, almost monastic, self-denial. It would be a story of assets consistently and willingly transferred from my column to another. That other column, the one that received all the deposits and bore none of the debits, is named Leo. My son Irene. For 40 years, the central project of my life was not building my own wealth or securing my own comfort, but ensuring that his column was always in the black. I was the secret, silent financier of his happiness, the unseen architect of his ease. I did it because I loved him. I called it motherhood. Now, looking at the final stark accounting of it all, I see it was something else entirely, a hostile takeover of my own life, which I had willingly co-signed. Before Leo, there was another Clara, a younger woman who dreamed in spreadsheets. It was not a grandiose dream. I never wanted to be a titan of Wall Street. I wanted to open my own small, independent accounting firm. My niche, my passion, was to help people who were terrified of numbers, artists, craftspeople, small-scale makers. I wanted to be the person who took their shoeboxes full of crumpled receipts and transformed them into coherent financial narratives, freeing them to create. I imagined a small, sunlit office with plants on the windowsill, the smell of coffee and old paper, the quiet satisfaction of helping a painter understand her profits, of showing a potter how to save for a new kiln. I had a business plan, detailed down to the penny, and a small growing nest egg I called my venture fund. It was the seed of a life that would be wholly my own, built on my own terms, a quiet testament to my own competence. Then I met Leah's father. He was a charming, handsome salesman who could sell ice in a blizzard, and he sold me a dream of a life together that turned out to be a fiction. He left when I was 6 months pregnant, leaving behind a mountain of debt and a note that said he wasn't cut out for this. The day I held Leo in my arms, a tiny, helpless creature completely dependent on me, the business plan was shredded. The venture fund was renamed the survival fund. The dream of a sunlit office was replaced by the stark reality of a third-floor walk-up and the bone-deep terror of single motherhood. That terror became the driving force of my life. It gave birth to my most secret, most guarded creation, the Fortress Fund. It started with just $5 a week, tucked into a different envelope. As my salary at the textile company grew, so did the deposits. I became a financial ghost. To the world, and especially to Leo, I was a woman of modest means. My clothes were from discount stores, my car was always second-hand, my furniture was comfortable but dated. I never took vacations. I never ate at fancy restaurants. This visible austerity was my camouflage. Behind it, I was running a silent, parallel operation. I studied market trends. I invested in low-risk mutual funds and bonds. I reinvested every dividend. I was a financial squirrel, hiding away nuts for a winter I prayed would never come, a winter when the world might abandon me again. The Fortress Fund was the one asset I never touched for anyone. It was my proof against ever being helpless again. It was my secret. It was mine. Everything else was for Leo. My entire public-facing financial life was a subsidiary of Leo Inc. I saw his childhood and young adulthood as a long-term investment, one that required massive, continuous capital injections. When he decided he wanted to attend a private high school because his friends were going there, I didn't say no. I took on freelance bookkeeping work at night, my eyes burning under the glow of a desk lamp as I reconciled the accounts of a local plumbing company, the numbers blurring together until the early hours of the morning. The tuition was paid and Leo never knew the cost. When he was a teenager, he went through a series of expensive, short-lived passions. There was the month he wanted to be a music producer. I bought him a synthesizer and software that cost 2 months of my grocery budget, cashing in a small bond I'd been nurturing for years. He used it for 3 weeks before it began gathering dust. Then came the skiing phase. The skis, boots, helmet, and trips to the mountains with his friends were all financed by my meticulously planned overtime, a fiction I created to explain the extra money. He saw only the thrill of the ski slopes. He never saw the exhausted woman eating toast for dinner for a month to pay for it. The biggest withdrawal came when he and his new wife, Fiona, wanted to buy their first house. Fiona came from a family that valued appearances above all else. She was beautiful, stylish, and had an appetite for luxury that terrified me. The modest starter homes I suggested were met with thinly veiled scorn. They found their dream house in a trendy, new development, a house far beyond their means. The down payment required was a staggering sum. They came to me, not asking, but expecting. "We just need a little help to get over the finish line, Mom," Leo had said, his tone casual, as if asking to borrow $20. That little help was the entire balance of my venture fund, the seed money I had never quite given up on, the last ghost of my own dream. I sat in the bank, the transfer form in front of me, and felt a physical pain, a tearing sensation deep inside me. But then I looked at Leo's hopeful, expectant face, the face of the boy I had raised to believe the world would always provide. And I signed the paper. I liquidated my dream to finance his. They got the house. My thank you was a lavish housewarming party to which I was invited, where Fiona introduced me to her friends as Leo's sweet mom. She's a bookkeeper, her tone making it sound like I collected stamps for a living. I thought my investment would yield returns of love, of inclusion, of security in my old age. I imagined myself a cherished part of their lives, a welcome presence in the beautiful home I had helped buy. I envisioned holidays filled with warmth, weekends spent with my grandchildren. But the dividends never came. My presence in their life was treated as a liability, not an asset. Visits became obligations they fulfilled with sighs and glances at their watches. Phone calls were chores to be checked off a list. They lived in their beautiful, expensive house, filling it with things they couldn't afford, while I continued to live my quiet, simple life. They saw my frugality, not as the source of their comfort, but as a sign of my smallness, my lack of ambition. They had no idea that their entire lifestyle was a superstructure built on the invisible, sacrificial foundation of my own. The day the foundation finally cracked was a Sunday. A gray, drizzly, miserable November afternoon. It wasn't a party, not a public spectacle. The humiliation, when it came, was a private, intimate affair, which made it all the more brutal. Leo and Fiona arrived at my small house unannounced. I knew from the moment I opened the door that something was wrong. They didn't carry the casual air of people dropping in for a cup of tea. They carried the heavy, toxic aura of desperation. Fiona was wearing a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to, but her face was pale and drawn beneath her perfect makeup. Leo, my handsome, confident son, looked haggard. His shoulders were slumped, and he couldn't meet my eyes. They swept into my living room, the room where I had taught Leo to read, and sat stiffly on my comfortable floral-patterned sofa, looking as out of place as 2 sleek greyhounds in a petting zoo. "We need to talk, Mom," Leo began, his voice flat. They laid it all out, not with the shame of people confessing their failures, but with the aggrieved air of victims of a great injustice. The story tumbled out, a litany of financial self-destruction. The credit card debt was staggering, maxed out on vacations, to places I'd only ever seen in magazines, on designer clothes, on restaurant meals that cost what I spent on a week's worth of groceries. There was a foolishly large loan for a second car, A sporty SUV for Fiona that was a necessity, she claimed, for her image as a freelance interior designer. And then came the final blow. They were 2 months behind on the mortgage for the house I had helped them buy. A final notice had arrived. They were on the brink of foreclosure. I listened in silence, my bookkeeper's mind automatically, dispassionately, tallying the figures. It was a catastrophic failure of fiscal discipline, a testament to a lifestyle built on fantasy. Every foolish purchase they described was a small, personal betrayal. The ski trip to Aspen. I remembered Leo telling me he was going on a work retreat. The designer watch on his wrist, he'd told me it was a bonus from his company. Lie after lie, built upon the foundation of my life's savings. When they finished, they looked at me, their eyes expectant. They weren't here for advice. They were here for a bailout. But the habit of a lifetime is hard to break. I tried one last time to be the wise, prudent mother, Dor. Leoma, I said, my voice calm and even. This is serious, but it's not insurmountable. You'll have to make some hard choices. You must sell Fiona's car immediately. You need to cut up the credit cards. You need to call the bank and try to renegotiate the mortgage. You'll have to live on a strict, cash-only budget. It will be difficult, but you can dig your way out of this. Die. Fiona let out a short, sharp, incredulous laugh. Sell my car? Clara, with all due respect, you don't understand. My car, Gizmus. My clients expect a certain level of success. I can't show up to a design consultation in a 10-year-old hatchback. And a budget? Leo scoffed, finally looking at me. His eyes filled not with gratitude for my suggestions, but with contempt. Mom, your idea of a budget is eating soup for a week. We have a life. We have friends. We have a position to maintain. No, miss. You have a position you can't afford, I said, my voice hardening slightly. The numbers don't lie, Leo. Oh, the numbers, he said, throwing his hands up in exasperation. You and your damn numbers. This isn't a ledger book, Mom. This is our life. We're drowning here, and you're giving us a lecture on how to swim. The argument escalated. Their voices grew louder, filled with the self-righteous fury of the irresponsible when faced with the consequences of their actions. They saw me not as a potential savior, but as an obstacle, a judgmental old woman who didn't get it. We thought you would help us, Fiona said, her voice laced with accusation. We thought you had some savings put away. For emergencies? This is an emergency of your own making, I said quietly. And that's when Leo broke me. My son, the center of my universe, the boy whose every need I had anticipated, whose every want I had financed, stood up and began to pace my small living room like a caged, angry animal. He looked at me, his face twisted in a mask of frustration and entitlement. You don't get it, do you? He spat, his voice shaking with rage. It's not that easy for us. We have pressures you can't even imagine. We're trying to build something, and it is so much harder when we have the constant, nagging burden of worrying about you, worrying about what you might need, worrying about your future, worrying that you'll be left with nothing. Honestly, Mom, sometimes you are just a burden. Esta. Be burden. I. None. Done. The word didn't just hang in the air. It exploded. It was a sonic boom that shattered the very glass of my heart, that shook the foundation of my entire identity. The air rushed from my lungs in a silent gasp. The room, my cozy, safe living room, suddenly felt vast and cold. The pattern on teacup, held in my trembling hand, blurred before my eyes. For 40 years, I had been his safety net, his financial engine, his silent, load-bearing wall. I had carried him, financially and emotionally, for his entire life. And in his mind, in his self-serving, grotesquely twisted narrative, time was the weight that was dragging him down. It was the ultimate, soul-crushing inversion of truth. He hadn't just insulted me, he had redefined our entire history. He had erased my sacrifice, and replaced it with his own fictional one. In that moment, the loving, endlessly giving, doting mother died. The warmth in my heart, the soft spot I had always held for my son, didn't just cool. It flash froze. It turned to a block of solid, impenetrable, unforgiving ice. And as the mother faded, the bookkeeper, the cold, clear-eyed accountant, took her place. I looked at him, truly looked at him, perhaps for the first time, without the distorting filter of maternal love. I saw not my beloved son, but a bad investment, a non-performing asset, a column of figures deep in the red. And the bookkeeper knew exactly what one does with a failing asset. You don't keep pouring money into it. You restructure the debt. You seize control. I placed my teacup carefully, silently, back on its saucer. My hand was no longer trembling. A glacial calm settled over me. I looked at their two anxious, predatory faces. They were still waiting for a handout. They were about to get a deal instead. "You're right, Leo," I said, and my voice was so quiet, so devoid of its usual warmth, that it startled them into silence. "You shouldn't have to carry such a burden." The word hung in the air of my small, quiet living room, thick and suffocating. Burden. It did not dissipate. It seemed to solidify, to crystallize into a monstrous, ugly thing that now occupied the space between us. It pulsed with the energy of 40 years of unspoken resentments, 40 years of his bottomless entitlement and my bottomless sacrifice. Leo had not just uttered an insult in a moment of anger. He had articulated his core philosophy. He had handed me the final, reconciled ledger of our relationship, and in his accounting, my love, my life's work, my entire being, had been entered not as an asset, but as a crippling liability. I looked at him, my son, the man-child pacing my worn rug, his handsome face contorted into a mask of self-pity. He had actually managed to convince himself that my existence, the very fact of me, was a weight upon his shoulders, the shoulders I had spent a lifetime ensuring would never have to bear any real weight at all. Fiona sat on the sofa, her expression a careful mixture of concern for her husband and righteous agreement with his sentiment. She was his silent, supportive auditor in this cruel accounting. In that moment, something inside me did not so much break as it did set, like concrete hardening in the cold. The frantic, wounded fluttering in my chest, the mother's instinct to soothe, to forgive, to make it all better, simply ceased. It was replaced by a profound, chilling, and utterly silent clarity. The emotional part of the ledger, the part filled with the messy, sentimental, unquantifiable entries of love and hope, was closed. For good. All that was left was the cold, hard, beautiful logic of the numbers. And the numbers told a very clear story. He and Fiona were financially insolvent. They were desperate. And desperation makes people pliable. It makes them sign things they wouldn't otherwise sign. The bookkeeper, the Clara who had been dormant for decades, the one who saw the world not through a mother's soft focus lens, but through the sharp, unforgiving clarity of a balance sheet, took full control. I felt her rise within me, calm, dispassionate, and utterly ruthless. She saw Leo and Fiona, not as family, but as a failing enterprise on the brink of liquidation. And she saw an opportunity. Not for revenge, not in a hot, angry sense. This was colder, more profound. It was an opportunity for a corporate restructuring of our family. An opportunity to reclaim my assets, to rebalance the ledger of my own life. I let the silence stretch, letting their anxiety ferment. I watched as Leo's angry pacing slowed, replaced by a nervous fidgeting. I saw Fiona's carefully constructed composure begin to fray at the edges. They had thrown their tantrum, and now they were waiting for my reaction. They expected tears or yelling, or a grudging, guilt-tripped promise of help. They had no frame of reference for the woman who was now looking at them. I placed my teacup carefully, silently, back on its saucer. The small clink of porcelain against porcelain was the only sound in the room. My hand, which had been trembling, was now as steady as a rock. A glacial calm, The kind I used to feel when tackling a particularly complex and messy set of accounts, settled over me. I looked at their two anxious, predatory faces, the faces of spoiled children who had just broken their most expensive toy and were now demanding their mother fix it. They were still waiting for a handout. They were about to get a deal instead. A deal with terms and conditions. "You're right, Leo," I said. My voice was so quiet, so devoid of its usual warmth, so stripped of any discernible emotion, that it startled them into absolute silence. They both stared at me, their eyes wide with surprise. "You shouldn't have to carry such a burden," I continued, my gaze steady and direct. "It's not fair to you or to Fiona. You have your own lives to build." Leo's expression shifted from anger to confusion, and then to a flicker of hope. He thought this was the prelude to my capitulation. He thought he had won. "Exactly, Mom," he said, his voice softening, becoming wheedling. "We just need a little help. A loan. Just to get us back on our feet." And I held up a hand, a small, quiet gesture that nonetheless stopped him cold. "No, Leo," I said. "Not a loan. Loans between family are messy. They create resentment. They are, from a bookkeeping perspective, a poor business practice." I paused, letting them absorb this. I was no longer speaking the language of a mother. I was speaking the language of a creditor. "You need a solution," I said. "A clean slate. And I have been thinking about my own future, my own security." I allowed a flicker of something they might mistake for vulnerability to enter my voice. "You are right to be worried about me. I am 68 years old, a retired bookkeeper. My own assets are limited." This was a lie, of course. My fortress fund, my secret, was anything but limited. But it was a lie they were predisposed to believe. It fit their narrative of me as a poor, struggling old woman. "So," I said, leaning forward slightly as if sharing a grand, newly formed idea, "I propose a transaction, a business deal, for our mutual benefit." They exchanged a quick, greedy glance. The word deal had captured their full attention. "Here is my offer," I said, my voice crisp and professional. I laid out the terms as if I were presenting a financial plan to the board of a company. "I will liquidate a significant portion of my retirement assets." I did not say which assets. "I will use those funds to pay off every single one of your debts, all of them, the credit cards, the car loan, and I will bring the mortgage completely up to date. I will give you a complete and total clean slate. Your monthly outgoings will be cut by more than half. You will be solvent again." Their faces, which had been tight with anxiety, began to glow with a euphoric, incredulous relief. Fiona's hand went to her heart. Leo looked like he was about to weep with joy. It was a miracle, a get-out-of-jail-free card. But I hadn't finished. I hadn't mentioned my terms. "However," I said, and the word cut through their silent celebration like a guillotine, "I am not a charity. As you pointed out, Leo, my future is precarious. I cannot simply give away my life savings. That would be irresponsible. It would make me a burden, and we all agree that is a situation to be avoided." I let that last word hang in the air, a quiet, pointed echo of his own insult. "Therefore," I continued, "to secure my investment, to ensure that my own future is protected, there will be one condition. It is non-negotiable." "Anything, Mom," Leo breathed, his eyes shining. "Anything." I looked him straight in the eye. "You will sign the house over to me." The silence that followed was of a different quality. It was a sharp, sudden intake of breath. The euphoria on their faces vanished, replaced by shock and suspicion. "What?" Fiona whispered, her voice a thin, reedy sound. "It's a simple legal arrangement," I explained, my tone reasonable and calm, as if I were explaining the most logical thing in the world. "You will sign a quitclaim deed, transferring the title of the property to my name. I will become the legal owner of the house. You will continue to live in it, of course. You will pay me a modest monthly rent, an amount far, far less than your current mortgage payment, which will provide me with a small, steady income for my retirement. It's a perfect circle. My investment is secured by a tangible asset, the house, and you are freed from the crushing weight of your debt. It's a win-win. Hermes. I watched their minds work. I could almost see the greedy, desperate calculations flickering behind their eyes. They were weighing the loss of the title against the immediate, glorious, intoxicating relief from their debt. They were thinking of the vacations they could still take, the clothes they could still buy, the life they could still live, freed from the constant, nagging terror of collections, calls, and foreclosure notices. The house, to them, was just an asset, a thing. They had no deep, emotional connection to it. They saw it as a temporary setback. They could always get it back later, they were probably thinking. They could talk the old woman around once the crisis was over. So, we would be renters? Leo asked, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. You would be residents, I corrected him smoothly. In a beautiful home, with no debt to your names. It is a temporary measure, of course, to protect my investment. Once I see that you are financially responsible, once my own future feels secure, we can always revisit the arrangement. Ah, another lie. A beautiful, elegant, necessary lie. We'll need to talk to a lawyer, Fiona said, her voice sharp with suspicion. Of course, I agreed immediately. You absolutely should. I insist upon it. I will even pay for your legal consultation. I want this to be completely transparent, completely above board. I knew that any competent lawyer would advise them against it. But I also knew the overwhelming, seductive power of a clean slate. I was betting on their greed and their desperation to override their common sense. I stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Think about it, I said, my voice now tinged with a grandmotherly warmth that was entirely feigned. It's a chance for a fresh start, a chance for all of us to be free from... I walked them to the door. They left in a daze, clutching a miracle and a poison pill in the same hand. As I watched their car pull away, I felt no guilt. I felt no remorse. I felt only the cold, clean, exhilarating thrill of a perfectly executed opening move in a game I now knew, with absolute certainty, I was going to win. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for the quarry to walk into it. The week that followed our business meeting was a masterclass in psychological warfare, executed with the quiet, devastating precision of a patient sniper. I did not call them. I did not text them. I did not chase them for an answer. I simply disappeared. I knew that my silence would be a far more powerful tool than any amount of persuasion. It would create a vacuum, and their desperation, their greed, their frantic hope for the miracle I had offered would rush in to fill it. Every day that passed without a word from me would amplify their terror of the alternative, foreclosure, bankruptcy, the humiliating collapse of their carefully constructed facade. Inside my own quiet house, I was a whirlwind of calm, focused activity. This was not about hot-blooded revenge. This was about cold, hard, logistical execution. I made an appointment with my own lawyer, the same meticulous Mr. Davies who had handled my secret trust. I explained the situation to him calmly and rationally. He listened, his face impassive, occasionally making a note on a long yellow legal pad. When I finished, he looked at me over the top of his spectacles, a flicker of something, admiration? Surprise? In his usually guarded eyes. Clara, he said slowly, this is unorthodox. Is it illegal? I asked, my voice steady. No, not at all, he conceded. As long as they are not under duress and have independent legal counsel, it is a perfectly legal transaction. It is, however, financially ruthless. They called me a burden, Mr. Davies, I said quietly. I am merely restructuring the terms of that burden. He nodded, a small, tight smile touching his lips. Understood. I will draw up the quitclaim deed and the rental agreement. The terms will be ironclad. Next, I went to my bank. I sat not with a friendly teller, but with the branch manager in a closed-door office. I began the process of liquidating a significant portion of my fortress fund. Seeing the numbers on the screen, the real, solid, breathtaking numbers I had accumulated over 40 years of secret, disciplined saving, was a deeply emotional moment. For decades, this fund had been an abstract concept, a secret comfort. Now, it was a tangible weapon. It was the sound of my own power, a quiet roar that only I could hear. I arranged for a certified check to be drawn up for the full amount of their combined debt, a figure that would have made the younger Clara faint, but which the current Clara saw only as the cost of doing business. The call from Leo came exactly 6 days later, on a Saturday morning. His voice was strained, a poor imitation of casual confidence. "Hey, Mom. So, Fiona and I have been talking, and we want to take your deal." I felt a cold, clean thrill, but my voice was warm, almost relieved. "Oh, Leo, I'm so glad. I was so worried for you both. I think this is the best thing for everyone." "Yeah," he said, the relief in his own voice palpable. "Woo. We spoke to a lawyer." "And what did he say?" I asked, feigning innocent curiosity. There was a slight hesitation. He had some concerns," Leo admitted. "But he agreed that, given the circumstances, it's a viable path forward. He said the paperwork seemed standard." I could almost hear the part he wasn't saying. The lawyer had almost certainly told them it was a terrible, foolhardy idea, but that it was their decision to make. My bet had paid off. The lure of the clean slate had been too strong to resist. "Wonderful," I said. "I've already had my lawyer draw up the paperwork. We can all meet at his office on Monday to sign." The signing was a scene of surreal, quiet drama. We sat around a large, polished mahogany table in Mr. Davies's conference room. The air was thick with the scent of old books and fresh coffee. Leo and Fiona sat on one side of the table, their own lawyer, a young, nervous-looking man who clearly felt out of his depth, beside them. I sat on the other side, with Mr. Davies. I watched their faces as Mr. Davies walked them through the documents, his voice a calm, professional drone. I saw the flash of greed in Fiona's eyes when she saw the certified check I had placed on the table, the check that would erase all their mistakes. I saw the flicker of doubt in Leah's face as he stared at the quitclaim deed, the document that would sign away the title to his beautiful home. But then he would glance at the check, and the doubt would be extinguished by the warm, intoxicating glow of salvation. Their lawyer made a few half-hearted attempts to protest. "Are you absolutely sure you understand," he said, his voice weak, "that by signing this, you are relinquishing all ownership rights to the property?" "We understand," Fiona said quickly, her eyes fixed on the check. "It's a temporary arrangement," Leo added, more to convince himself than anyone else. "To help my mother feel secure." I said nothing. I simply sat there, a benevolent, slightly frail-looking old woman in a simple cardigan, a silent matriarch presiding over a family transaction. They signed. First Fiona, her signature a flamboyant, looping scrawl. Then Leo, his a hesitant, slightly shaky scribble. As the pen left the paper, I felt a fundamental shift in the universe. The ledger of my life, so horrifically unbalanced for so long, had just been reconciled with a single, beautiful, devastating stroke. Mr. Davies notarized the documents with a heavy, satisfying thud of his official stamp. He slid the signed quitclaim deed across the table to me. I took it, the paper warm from their hands. It felt heavier than a simple piece of paper. It felt like justice. I then pushed the certified check across the table to them. "Here you are," I said, my voice gentle. "Your fresh start." Fiona snatched it up as if she were afraid I might change my mind. The relief that washed over their faces was almost orgasmic. They were free. They had done it. They had offloaded their problems, secured their lifestyle, and all it had cost them was a piece of paper they were sure they could reverse later. They looked at me with a new kind of condescension, the pity of the clever for the fool who has just been duped. We stood up to leave. Leo, in a sudden burst of performative gratitude, leaned in to hug me. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered in my ear. "You saved us. I promise, we'll make this up to you." I patted his back, my touch light, almost clinical. I know you will, dear, I said. As they walked out of the office, already chattering excitedly about a new restaurant they wanted to try that weekend, I stayed behind with Mr. Davies. He handed me my copies of the signed documents. The deed will be filed with the county clerk's office this afternoon, he said. You are now the sole legal owner of the property located at 125 Willow Creek Lane. He then handed me another document, one that Leo and Fiona had not seen. It was a simple, standard eviction notice, drawn up according to state law, giving the current residents 30 days to vacate the premises. It was already filled out, lacking only my signature and the date. And this? I asked, though I already knew. A tool, Mr. Davies said, his face impassive. For the next stage of the restructuring, to be deployed at your discretion. I took the papers, placed them in my handbag, and walked out into the cool afternoon air. I felt no joy, no glee. I felt only the quiet, profound, and deeply satisfying chill of a perfectly balanced account. The debt had been paid. The asset had been secured. The burden had been transferred. And they had no idea. They were celebrating their freedom, unaware that they had just handed me the keys to their cage. The 2 weeks following the signing were a study in blissful, arrogant ignorance on their part, and quiet, methodical preparation on mine. Leo and Fiona, liberated from the crushing weight of their self-inflicted financial ruin, immediately reverted to type, but with a renewed, almost manic vigor. They were like lottery winners, drunk on their sudden, unearned salvation. The certified check was cashed the very next day. From my silent listening post, I learned, through Fiona's not-so-humble posts on social media, and from snippets of a phone call I overheard when Leo called to ask for my Netflix password, that the fresh start I had provided was being celebrated with breathtaking profligacy. There was a weekend trip to a spa resort, documented with photos of them in plush white robes, champagne glasses in hand, captioned with hashtags like #newbeginnings and #blessed. Fiona bought a new handbag that cost more than my monthly Social Security check, posting a picture of it sitting on the passenger seat of her necessary SUV. They hosted a large catered dinner party at the house, me house, to celebrate some good financial news. I was not invited. I was, after all, just the boring, old, quaint source of that good news, and my presence would have undoubtedly cast a pall on the festivities. I watched all of this from a distance, with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist observing a petri dish of particularly predictable bacteria. Their behavior was not surprising. It was merely confirming data. I felt no anger, no fresh sting of betrayal. Instead, I felt a kind of grim validation. Every foolish purchase, every boastful post, was another nail they were hammering into their own coffin. They were proving my case for me. During this time, I was not idle. I did not stew in resentment. I operated with the cool, emotionless efficiency of a woman closing out the books on a failed company. I met with Mr. Davies again. We finalized the last details. I had him draw up a comprehensive financial plan for myself, one that utilized the new, modest rent I would be collecting. It was a beautiful document, full of projections and compound interest, a testament to a life of quiet, secure, independent dignity. I also made a few phone calls. One was to a highly recommended property management company. Another was to a locksmith. I was not just reclaiming a house, I was reclaiming my life, and I would do it with the same meticulous attention to detail I had once devoted to balancing a ledger. The moment I chose to lower the boom was precisely 1 month to the day after the signing. I let them have their 30 days of hollow, joyful celebration. I let them get comfortable. I let them believe, truly and deeply, that they had gotten away with it, that their cleverness had won, and that their doddering old mother had been successfully managed. I drove to the house, me house, on a Tuesday afternoon. I didn't call ahead. An owner does not need to make an appointment to visit their own property. I used the key they had given me years ago, a key I was sure they had forgotten I even possessed. The key slid into the lock with a satisfying, solid click. I entered a house that was both familiar and alien. It was filled with the expensive, sterile furniture Fiona had chosen, all sharp angles and muted, joyless colors. A massive television was playing a reality show to an empty room. Half-empty wine glasses and a cheese board, crawling with flies, sat on the marble coffee table, remnants of the previous night's indulgence. The air smelled stale, a mixture of expensive scented candles and neglect. Fiona was home. I heard her upstairs, talking on the phone, her voice bright and brittle. "Oh, you absolutely must get the one with the gold hardware, darling," she was saying. "It's an investment piece." I walked to the center of the living room and stood there, waiting. I did not call out to her. Eventually, she came down the grand, curving staircase, still chattering on her phone. She saw me and stopped dead on the bottom step, her eyes widening in surprise, then narrowing with annoyance. "Clara," she said, her voice sharp with irritation as she ended her call. "You scared me half to death. What are you doing here? You should have called." "Hello, Fiona," I said, my voice calm and pleasant. "This is a beautiful home. You've kept it well." The compliment seemed to disarm her slightly. "Well, thank you," she said, preening. "I do my best." "I'm sure you do," I said, "which is why I know you'll understand that I need to ensure my asset is properly protected." I reached into my handbag and pulled out a long white envelope. I held it out to her. It was the 30-day eviction notice Mr. Davies had prepared. She stared at the envelope, then at my face, her brow furrowed in confusion. She did not take it. "What is that?" "It's a business correspondence," I said simply, "regarding the property at 125 Willow Creek Lane. As the owner, I'm providing you with the legally required notification regarding a change in tenancy." Her confusion curdled into disbelief. She slowly reached out and took the envelope, her manicured fingers trembling slightly. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the dense, legalistic text. I watched as the color drained from her face, leaving her expensive foundation looking like a pale, chalky mask. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She read it again, her eyes darting back and forth, as if willing the words to rearrange themselves into a different meaning. 30 days, she finally whispered, the words a puff of air. To vacate? What is this? Is this a joke?" "I assure you, Fiona, I am not joking," I said, my voice still placid. "As the owner of this property, I have decided to terminate the current residential arrangement. You and Leo have 30 days to remove your personal belongings and vacate the premises. It's all perfectly legal. It's all right there in the paperwork." But you said," she stammered, her mind scrambling, her voice rising in panic. "You said we could live here. You said it was a temporary arrangement. You said you just wanted to feel secure." "And I do feel secure," I said, allowing a small, cool smile to touch my lips. "Owning this property outright makes me feel very secure indeed. So secure, in fact, that I've decided I'd like to live in it myself. A woman my age shouldn't be rattling around in a small house all by herself. It's not safe." Her face, which had been pale with shock, now began to flush with a dark, mottled rage. "You can't do this," she shrieked, the carefully constructed facade of the sophisticated lady crumbling into dust, revealing the greedy, terrified shrew beneath. "We had a deal. Leo will kill you, will sue you, will tell everyone what you've done." "Please do," I said, my voice unwavering. "Tell them you were drowning in debt from your own reckless spending. Tell them my deal saved you from foreclosure and bankruptcy. And then tell them that you were asked to leave the house that I own, a house I paid for not once, but twice. I wonder whose side they will take." Just then, the front door opened and Leo walked in. He was smiling, humming to himself, holding a bag from an expensive gourmet market. He saw me, saw the look on his wife's face, saw the paper in her hand, and his smile vanished. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. "What's going on?" "Your mother is kicking us out," Fiona screamed, turning on him. "She's throwing us out of our own house." "Me house, Leo," I corrected him softly, turning my calm, steady gaze upon him. He flinched, as if my quiet voice were a physical blow. He took the paper from Fiona's hand and read it, his face going through a rapid, devastating series of transformations, from confusion to disbelief to a dawning, sickening horror. He looked up from the paper, his eyes wide, his face ashen. He looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw not just the terror of losing his home, but the dawning, soul-crushing understanding of just how badly he had been outmaneuvered. He had seen me as a burden, a problem to be managed, a simple-minded old woman. He had never, not once, seen me as an intelligent, competent, and utterly ruthless opponent. "Mom, why?" he whispered, the question not an accusation, but a plea from a checkmated king to the quiet pawn that had just crossed the board and become a queen. "You said I was a burden, Leo," I said, my voice still quiet, still reasonable, but now infused with the cold, hard weight of a lifetime of suppressed truth. "A burden is a heavy, unwanted thing that you are forced to carry. I have simply decided I no longer wish to carry you. I am putting you down." He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing silently. All the lies, all the deceptions, all the years of taking me for granted, all culminated in this moment of silent, devastating clarity in my living room. He had no defense. He had no argument. He had only the stark, undeniable truth of the document in his hand, and the quiet, implacable woman standing before him. 30 days, I said, my voice softening, almost to a whisper, which was somehow more terrifying than a shout. "I'd suggest you stop buying expensive groceries and start buying cardboard boxes." I turned, without another word, and walked towards the door. I could feel their eyes on my back, their world collapsing into rubble behind me. I did not look back. I stepped out into the cool, clean air, got into my old, reliable car, and drove away. The ledger was balanced. The account was closed. The collapse was absolute. The 30 days that followed were not quiet. They were filled with a cacophony of their desperation. There were angry, rambling voicemails from Leo, alternating between threats of legal action and pathetic, tearful pleas for forgiveness. There were long, vitriolic emails from Fiona, accusing me of being a monster, a cruel, unnatural mother. I did not respond to any of them. I had my lawyer's office handle all communication. Their noise was the sound of a storm I was no longer in the middle of. I was watching it from a safe, quiet harbor, my anchor securely set. On the 30th day, the property management agent I had hired, a crisp, efficient woman named Mrs. Gable, met me at the house. The moving truck had just pulled away. Leo and Fiona were gone. We walked through the empty rooms, our footsteps echoing on the bare hardwood floors. The house was not clean. They had left in a fit of petulant rage, leaving behind scuff marks on the walls, takeout containers on the kitchen counters, and a palpable aura of bitterness. Mrs. Gable took notes on a clipboard. "Left it in a bit of a state," she said, her voice brisk. "But it's nothing a good cleaning crew and a coat of paint can't fix. The bones are good. The bones are good." The phrase resonated deep within me. The house had good bones. And so, I realized, did I. They had just been buried under 40 years of self-neglect. In the weeks that followed, the house was transformed. The joyless gray and beige walls were painted in warm, cheerful shades of cream and sage green. The cold, angular furniture was sold, and I brought in my own comfortable, familiar pieces, the ones that held stories. I hired a company to refinish the floors, and the wood now glowed with a deep, honeyed warmth. The house began to feel less like a sterile showroom and more like a home. Mine home. But the most significant transformation was not in the house, but in me. I had spent my life as a bookkeeper, managing the finances of others. Now, for the first time, I applied my skills to the most important account I had ever handled, my own. I did not move into the large, ostentatious house myself. That was never the plan. It was too big, too full of ghosts. Instead, I had Mrs. Gable's company rented out to a lovely young family with 2 children. The rental income, combined with my Social Security and the earnings from my still considerable fortress fund, provided me with a level of financial security I had never allowed myself to even dream of. With this new security came a new freedom. The first thing I did was sell my small, cramped house. Then, I bought a small, beautiful condo in a building downtown. It had a large balcony that overlooked a city park and a spare bedroom with perfect, north-facing light. That bedroom did not become a guest room. It became my office. I took the old, dusty business plan for Sterling Accounting Services, the one I had written as a young woman full of quiet ambition, and I updated it. I got a business license. I had professional cards printed. I started small, taking on just 1 or 2 clients, a local potter, a freelance graphic designer, people who were brilliant at their craft, but terrified of the numbers. And I discovered that the passion, the dream I had buried 45 years ago, was not dead. It had merely been dormant, waiting for the right conditions to bloom. I found a profound, quiet joy in taking a shoebox full of their crumpled receipts and transforming it into a clean, clear, beautiful balance sheet. I found a deep satisfaction in sitting with them, explaining their profits and losses, helping them plan for their future, and seeing the fear in their eyes replaced with understanding and confidence. I wasn't just balancing their books, I was empowering them. And in doing so, I was empowering myself. I received one final letter from Leo about 6 months after he had moved out. It was not angry or pleading. It was short and shockingly direct. It contained only 2 sentences. Fiona has left me. I have to declare bankruptcy. I read the letter, then folded it neatly, and placed it in a file I had labeled Leo Inc., account closed. I felt a brief, faint echo of sadness, not for the man he had become, but for the baby I had once held in my arms. But that sadness was quickly replaced by a sense of profound, unshakable peace. His life, his choices, his consequences, they were no longer my responsibility. They were no longer my burden. His ledger was his own to balance now. This evening, I am sitting on the balcony of my condo. The sun is setting over the park, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. A cup of my favorite, expensive tea is steaming on the small table beside me. My desk is visible through the sliding glass door, my next client's neat, organized file waiting for me. My life is not large or loud, but it is wholly, completely, and gloriously my own. The numbers add up. The books are balanced. For decades, I thought my worth was defined by how much I could give away, by how much of myself I could sacrifice on the altar of motherhood. I learned, in the cruelest way possible, that a life spent as a constant sacrifice doesn't earn you love, it earns you contempt. It teaches others that you have no value of your own. True value, I now understand, is not in what you give away, but in what you refuse to. It is in the assets you hold in reserve, in the boundaries you draw, in the non-negotiable terms you set for your own life. I was a bookkeeper who had allowed her own life to become a bad debt, but I found the courage to call it in. I restructured, I reclaimed, and I rebuilt. And I have learned that the most important ledger you will ever balance is your own.